Once upon a time, a girl with moonlight in her eyes put her hand in mine and said she loved me so. But that was once upon a time, very long ago. Once upon a time, we sat beneath a willow tree, counting all the stars and waiting for the dawn. But that was once upon a time. Now the tree is gone. How the breeze ruffled through her hair, how we always laughed as though tomorrow wasn't there. We were young and didn't have a care. Where did it go? Once upon a time, the world was sweeter than we knew. Everything was ours. How happy we were then. But somehow once upon a time never comes again.
I always had such a fit about it. Terrible. I have a big clumsy hand.
Well,
It just doesn't hang right.
that's
and it
maybe
shows
fine
through.
or unacceptable on dresses, but on pants.
Well, if pants are especially if they're nice material, you don't want to. Maybe it wouldn't hurt on jeans, but these need to be really done right. What do you want me to talk about?
Well, we talked about.
Am I on now already?
Yeah.
I'm on, all right.
How old are you now?
What year is this? This is, I was born 1917. This coming year, this, let's see, this is 87. So I will be 70, which is a revolting development. I don't feel like I'm going to be 70. I guess I have to just look in the mirror and acknowledge it, but
Where were you born?
I was born in Evanston, Illinois. I hope you have enough prompting.
Where was your mother born?
My mother was born in New York City. My father was born in Chicago. They were married in Chicago. And unlike your father, I never met any of my grandparents and didn't really know anything about them. My aunt, my mother's sister, Leah White, always lived with us. She just gave up her life to make a home with my mother and father. And she's the one that did all the planning and all the marketing and all the cooking and all the supervision. She was a great manager. And she just never had a life of her own from that time on. My mother was just content to let her take over. So I really had a substitute mother at the same time I had a mother. And she never married. She was what they used to call a maiden lady. but she was a remarkable woman with a lot of intelligence and a lot of initiative and creativity, because she taught school, and she had never really had a great deal of formal education herself, but she was always interested in children, and she just knew how to stimulate them and get the most out of their learning processes. And she died of cancer, let's see, 1945. Well, let's see, what you want to know about my grandmother? I really think she talked more to Ross, my husband, than she ever did to me about the family, so it may be that he knows things that I don't remember. We were never very interested in genealogy, and they always felt like the past was gone and that the future was the important thing. Boy, this sunlight's coming right in on this thing.
Well.
Ooh. Let me move just... I guess I gotta move a couple more inches.
Go ahead.
I
Move
can't.
wherever you need to.
Well, let me just get so that the sun won't... Here, that's better. Sun won't blind these stitches. Let's see.
What was her maiden name?
Maiden name was White. And they had, was my mother and my aunt, and then I had two uncles. They had two brothers. One was a surgeon out in, operated in Clinton, Iowa. He died of malaria. They finally caught the blood at the right cycle, and they found out that's what it was, but it was too late to cure him. He'd been bitten by a mosquito down when he was in New Orleans one time, and there wasn't a whole lot they could do about malaria at that time. And he was a very good surgeon, though, and apparently had made a lot of money. He used to come into Chicago Thanksgiving time, and he would take us all to the theater, and would always bring a whole carton or crate of that golden, delicious corn that was raised in Iowa. You know, they say that's where the tall corn grows. And we always remember him that way, as taking us to the theater.
What was his name?
His name was Herman Alexander White. That's who Ross Alexander was named after. And he was married, but he never had any children. And his wife never cared much for the rest of the family, so we had very little contact with him. And she was a very bitter, self-centered person that never did anything outside of her own little circle. And I think she probably resented the time that he spent with his patient. She didn't think she was not a very good doctor's wife. But anyway, and the other brother was he lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and his hobby was raising chow dogs. And he had a kennel full of very prized, very valuable animals. And he was another kind of a loner, and he never really kept in contact with the family either. They really lost track of him. His name was Joseph. I can't remember the middle name. And I really never got to know him at all, because he never came to visit, and we never went to visit him. And what else do you want to know?
Well, how about your father's side?
Father's side I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about his parents. He was, he had a sister that lived in Chicago. She had a family, and she was real jolly, very nice person. And he had a brother that moved out to California. He had a match company, and he and his brother were very much alike. They were real friendly, very outgoing people. And my father had a marvelous ability to make people laugh. He could be friends with anybody and get to know them and get them to laugh. And I know I used to get so provoked because I don't ever remember having a dinner at home without he would make me laugh when I'd have a mouthful of food or a glass full of water, and then I'd have mess all over the table. But he was so funny, and he really had a marvelous sense of humor. Oh, I need a handkerchief. Stop the presses. He really should have been on the stage. That's what he just loved to do, was to entertain. And it's just too bad that he never had an opportunity to be in show business. 'Cause I think he would have been a great success. He just had a natural talent, and he used to enjoy the shows. He was interested in sports of all kinds. Never liked football particularly because he felt like that was too rough. But before television came in, he would always listen to all the baseball games. He knew all the standings of the major league and some of the minor league ball clubs. And he would go to see that. He was a Cubs fan, and he would go watch the Cubs play at Wrigley Field. And he kept up with hockey. He took me to a hockey game one time, and for none of which I understood. And he liked boxing, and he liked tennis. I don't think he cared too much for, but baseball and the golf. He was a real golfer, and I don't know that I ever knew what his handicap was or what his average was. And he loved bowling. In fact, he had a heart attack while he was bowling and died. And that was in, let's see, that's when you were a baby, Bruce. 51. And stop the thing, I gotta get collected. I don't know where I am.
What was his occupation?
Well, he started out in life as a tailor, and then he went into a business with a friend, and they manufactured citrate of magnesia. You probably never heard of that. But citrate of magnesia was a popular thing. It was a laxative. Instead of milk of magnesia, they made a citrate of magnesia, which was, they thought, a lot more pleasant. It tasted, he said, like lemonade. But it was a laxative. And he and his partner were in that. Well, then his partner, either they sold out or the partner died, or he decided to get out of business. I've forgotten. Anyway, so he had, at that time, $10,000, which just seemed like a tremendous amount of money. And my father was a wonderful person, but unfortunately he had very little business, whatever that word is, not ability, but he just didn't know how to make money. He didn't know how to manage money. And he was so good-hearted, he would just give away everything that he had. He was just so honest. He never would cheat anybody in his business dealings, and I think he was probably cheated in that partnership dissolution, and he should have really gotten a lot more money than that. But anyway, he decided he would take this money and invest it. And if he hadn't had quite so much pride, he could have listened to my Aunt Leah, because she's the one that had the real business know-how, and she could just do wonders with any kind of money. And if he would have just listened to her and let her advise him on what to do with that amount of capital he had, she would have really, been able to make a lot of money for him. But this was his first chance to really have a lump sum of money, and he really wanted to do it, on his own, be independent, because he had always lived with her and had always taken her advice. on stock markets and everything else. She was a self-taught architect, and she had built and designed many buildings in Chicago, many apartment buildings, and was quite an innovative arrangement that she had. She had installed gas in one of the first apartments in Chicago, and so he wanted to do this on his own. So he decided that a good field was dog food, and he was going to manufacture dog food, canned dog food. So they worked for weeks on getting a label and all the nitpicking things that you have to do, and they got into production, but there were a whole lot of complications, as anybody knows who started up a business. And he had met somebody that had this formula that was just going to be a real winner for this dog food, but he had to get into the end of advertising and of promoting it, and there were just a whole lot of things that he just did not have the background for, and the project just fizzled, and he just lost all that money and ended up then with nothing. So it was really very frustrating for him, and to have to really admit that he didn't do it right and couldn't do it right. And I don't know, he just did odd things after that. He was he handled a line of drug products from the drugstore, not really medicine, but everything else that the drugstore sells, and I don't know who I guess he was selling it to people, but I don't know who, or maybe he was selling it to drugstores. I just really don't know. He never did a lot of talking about it, and that was considered something the children didn't have to be concerned about, you know. And so I don't really know how he had any income at the last years of his life. But
How much education did he
he had very little education. I think he probably went, I'm not even positive he went through high school. He may have, but I never heard him talk about it.
about?
But both he and my mother especially felt that education was really an important factor, and they were determined that my sister and I would, have a good education. And she went east to college, which was supposed to be the thing at that time. That women's colleges were, I think, rated as high as the Ivy League for the men. And she graduated from Connecticut College for Women in 1934 in English, and of course you can't do anything with English except teach it, and she did not want to teach. She ended up in social work in Chicago and was a very good social worker. She really knew how to get the most for the people that were in the need, and it's a very depressing situation where you have to you feel like you get involved with the people that you're trying to help. It's such a vicious circle of the welfare, and so it was not a very enlightening field she was in. Let's see.
Which of your father's skills do you think you inherited, or talents?
Skills. Well, one thing I remember about him, he had an uncanny knack of being able to tell you what time it was. No matter, I don't know, did I ever tell you this? And I would try to catch him. I would just be sure that he would be looking at his watch, just before I'd ask him what time it was, and he would tell me just within a minute or two. And I just I tried to catch him, and I never was able to. I really feel like he had this gift that he could tell you what time it was, no matter what. And he would not have just looked at his watch, and he could tell you within a minute or two. And so I have tried that the last couple of years, trying to see if I can guess without looking, and I'm usually within 5 or 10 minutes. That's as close as I can come, but it's really strange. I don't know. I don't have his gift of humor that he had. I can remember that whenever they had a dinner party, he would always write up a little spiel about everybody that was going to come, some humorous anecdote that he would remember or describe the person, and then he would be like a master of ceremonies and give this, tell everybody at the table describe everybody else there, and it was really a riot. And I don't have any of that. He would write poetry, and he was very good. I don't know that other than that what talent. He was real good at doing what you were doing today, and that's what he did when the baseball games were on Saturday afternoon. My aunt would give him all the jobs that needed doing, the lamps that needed rewiring, and the switches would be off, and if a radio needed fixing, he would fiddle around with that. And when shortly after we were married, we got a clock for a wedding present, and Ross never did like it. And so we were over there one time visiting, and Ross started to take this clock apart. He was going to, I think, put the works in another case is what he was going to try to do. And my father said, only a jeweler and a damn fool ever takes a clock apart. He was really impressed when Ross came and didn't have any parts left over. It all came out. It worked out.
What was his name?
Harry Herman. He never had a middle name. And as I said, there was just my sister and I, and he wanted to call me Harriet after him, because he was the only male in the family, and he felt very neglected as far as his input went, and that they outvoted him, my mother and my aunt, so I was named Edith, which they preferred, which I've never liked.
Where did that name come from?
I don't know, they just liked the name. It wasn't named after anybody, and they just liked the name Madeline, and so that was my middle name.
What was your mother's name?
Florence White. And she didn't have a middle name either. She was, my father used to say, you probably don't remember seeing Burns and Allen when they were on television, but Gracie would do such crazy things, and then George would say something about, that he loved her, or, that's my Gracie or something. Well, that's what my father used to say, that he, how did he put it? I can't even remember, but that he loved her, and that just took care of everything.
country dance was being held in a garden. I felt a bump and heard an, oh, beg your pardon. Suddenly I saw polka dots and moonbeams all around a pug-nosed dream. The music started, and was I the perplexed one? I held my breath and said, may I have the next one? In my frightened arms, polka dots and moonbeams sparkled on a pug-nosed dream. There were questions in the eyes of other dancers as we floated over the floor. There were questions, but my heart knew all the answers, and perhaps a few things more. Now in a cottage built of lilacs and laughter, I know the meaning of the words ever after, and I'll always see polka dots and moonbeams when I kiss the pug-nosed dream.